It was 8:47 on a Tuesday night when my phone buzzed against the kitchen counter, and I already knew before I looked that it would be her. I was standing alone in a house I had paid for, scraping the last of a can of tomato soup into a bowl I didn't want to eat from, listening to the refrigerator hum the way it does when nobody else is home. My granddaughter's crayon drawings were still taped to that fridge, curling at the corners. I had made the dinner that was sitting in the warming drawer 2 hours earlier, a pot roast, carrots, the rosemary potatoes my son used to beg me for when he was 9 years old. I had made it for all of them. And all of them had gone out without me. The text said, "Margaret, heat up the dinner when you get a chance. Don't let it dry out. We'll be late." That was it. No thank you. No, we wish you were here. Just an instruction, the kind you'd leave for the help. They were 3 miles away at the Lakeview Chop House celebrating my daughter-in-law's big night, the night she'd been named partner at her firm, and they had not thought to set a chair for me at the table I had bought. I read the text once. Twice. A third time. And I felt something inside my chest go very quiet, the way a room goes quiet right before a storm, when the birds stop singing and the air turns heavy and still. It wasn't only the words. It was the tone underneath them, the easy, thoughtless ownership of me, the certainty that the old woman would do as she was told, the way you don't even hear yourself thanking a vending machine. I did not cry. I did not call my son. I did not throw the bowl of soup against the wall, though God knows the thought crossed my mind. I typed back one word. Okay. And then I set the phone down, and I walked upstairs, and I opened the closet in the back bedroom, the one nobody ever went into, and I took down a box that none of them knew existed. Because here is what my daughter-in-law did not know, what none of them sitting at that restaurant raising their glasses could have imagined. I had been getting ready for this exact night for almost a year. And this time I was not going to heat up their dinner. This time I was going to vanish. And when they came home that night, full of wine and laughter and the warm certainty that the old woman would be right where they'd left her, what they found behind that door instead would freeze every one of them where they stood. But before I tell you what they found, you need to understand how I got here. You need to understand how a 71-year-old woman who gave her family everything she had ended up eating soup alone in a corner of her own house, treated like a piece of furniture that had outlived its use. So if you want to know how this story ends, and I promise you, it ends in a way none of them saw coming, stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you might change the way you look at your own family forever. Let me take you back 4 years, to the morning I made the decision that I thought would save my old age, and instead signed it away. My husband, Walter, died on a cold morning in March, 4 years and 2 months ago. 41 years of marriage, and then a stroke took him in his sleep, quiet and sudden, the way he'd always said he wanted to go. No fuss, Maggie, he used to tell me. When it's my time, just let me slip out the back door. He got his wish. I was the one left standing in the kitchen the next morning holding 2 coffee cups, having poured one out of habit for a man who would never drink it again. We had a good life. Not a rich one. Walter was a high school shop teacher for 35 years, and I worked the front office at a pediatric clinic until my knees gave out, but a solid one. We owned our little ranch house on Birchwood Lane outright, paid off the year before he retired. We had a pension, a modest retirement account, and what Walter always called the rainy day money, which lived in a savings account neither of us touched. But after the funeral, the house got too big and too loud with silence. Every room had his fingerprints on it, the bookshelf he built, the back porch he screened in himself, the workbench in the garage where he still had a half-finished birdhouse clamped in the vise. I'd find myself standing in doorways for no reason, waiting for a sound that wasn't going to come. I'd set the table for 2 before I caught myself. I'd hear the furnace kick on at night and think it was him moving around downstairs. Grief, I learned, isn't a wave that knocks you over once. It's the tide. It comes in every single evening at the same hour, and you can set your watch by it. My son, Brandon, came to see me about a month after we buried his father. He brought his wife, Vanessa, and that smile he'd worn since he was a little boy, the one he used when he wanted something but hadn't figured out how to ask yet. I knew that smile better than I knew my own face. I'd watched it talk me into a puppy when he was 8, a used car when he was 17, and a co-signed loan when he was 23. It was a good smile. It was a dangerous smile. "Mom," he said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table with a cup of the coffee I'd made. "Van and I have been talking. We hate the idea of you rattling around here all alone." Vanessa nodded, turning her wedding ring with her thumb. She was a beautiful woman, sharp cheekbones, a wardrobe that cost more than my monthly pension, the kind of polish you can't fake. "We worry about you, Margaret," she said. "A woman your age, in a house this size. What if you fell? What if something happened and nobody knew for days?" I'd had the same thought myself, lying awake at night. I'd read the stories, the ones about widows found a week after, the milk gone sour on the porch. So I leaned in. That was my first mistake, though I wouldn't understand it for years. I leaned toward the people who'd found exactly the right fear to press on. "What are you suggesting?" Brandon and Vanessa exchanged one of those married people looks, the kind that carries a whole conversation in a single glance. Then Brandon said it. "We found a place. A bigger house, out in the Cedar Ridge development, 5 bedrooms, a real yard for the kids, good schools. It's perfect. The only thing is..." He looked down at his coffee. "The down payment's a stretch. We've got some saved, but we're about 90,000 short." The number hung in the air. "If you sold this place," Vanessa said gently, reaching across to touch my hand, "you could come live with us. You'd have your own room, your own bathroom, we'd make sure of it. You'd never be alone again. The kids would have their grandmother right down the hall. It would be a real family, all of us under one roof." That word. Family. It went straight through the loneliness in me like a key into a lock. I have thought about that moment 10,000 times since. If I could go back, I would not say no, I would simply say, "Let me think, let me talk to a lawyer, let me sleep on it for a month." But I was 67 and freshly widowed and frightened of the tide that came in every evening, and they were offering me a house full of noise and grandchildren and a reason to get up in the morning. So I said yes the way a drowning person grabs a rope, without checking whether the other end was tied to anything. I sold the house on Birchwood Lane 11 weeks later. It went for $230,000, which felt like a fortune to a woman who'd never made more than $38,000 a year in her life. The day the new owner's moving truck pulled up, I sat in my car across the street and watched strangers carry boxes into the house where I'd raised my son, and I cried so hard I couldn't drive for 20 minutes. Then I dried my face and told myself I was being foolish, that a house is only wood and nails, that family is what matters. I gave Brandon $90,000 for the down payment, handed it over without a second thought, because he was my son and that's what mothers do. The rest I kept. $140,000, plus Walter's rainy day account, plus the retirement money. I put it all in the bank and told myself it was my cushion, my safety net, the thing that would let me hold my head up no matter what happened. What I did not do, and I'll come back to this, because it's the hinge the whole story turns on, was tie any of it to that new house. Brandon said it wasn't necessary. "It's already going to be tight getting approved, Mom. Adding you to the mortgage just complicates everything. Besides, your family, what's mine is yours." And I, like a fool who'd just lost her husband and couldn't bear to lose anyone else, believed him. The new house in Cedar Ridge was everything they'd promised. Granite countertops, a 3-car garage, a great room with a ceiling so high your voice disappeared into it. The first few months were tolerable. Better than tolerable, even. The grandkids, Tyler, who was 10, and little Emma, who was 6, would come tumbling into my room in the mornings, and I'd make them pancakes shaped like animals, and for a while I let myself believe I'd made the right choice. I got up at 5:30 every morning. I made the coffee the way Brandon liked it, dark and strong. I packed the kids' lunches, signed their permission slips, walked Emma to the bus stop because Vanessa said the corner made her nervous. I did the laundry, all of it, for people's worth. I scrubbed the bathrooms. I ironed Brandon's shirts and Vanessa's blouses. I cooked dinner every single night, a real dinner, because Vanessa said she didn't have the bandwidth after work. And slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice it happening, I stopped being Brandon's mother and started being something else. Vanessa worked in commercial real estate, and she was good at it, ambitious, relentless, the kind of woman who answered emails at midnight and took calls during dinner. I'll give her that. But the higher she climbed, the more she seemed to need someone beneath her, and I was the one standing closest. It started with small corrections. Margaret, the towels go folded in thirds, not in half, it looks neater on the shelf. Margaret, you used the good olive oil for cooking? That's for finishing, it's $12 a bottle. Margaret, did you really let Emma have a second cookie? We're trying to teach her self-control. There was a logic to each one, and that was the trap of it. Every correction was small enough to sound reasonable, and to object would have made me the unreasonable one. So I folded the towels in thirds. I learned which oil was which. I rationed the cookies. And each small surrender taught me, without my noticing, to be a little smaller. Never Mom. Never Maggie, the way Walter's whole family had called me for 4 decades. Just Margaret, clipped and cool, the way you'd say the name of a contractor who'd done shoddy work. The kids loved me, and that was real, and I think that was the problem. One evening Tyler told Vanessa at the dinner table, "Grandma's spaghetti is better than the kind you order, Mom." It was an innocent thing, the kind of thing a child says. But I saw Vanessa's face go tight and pale, and that night, through the wall, I heard them arguing. "Your mother is undermining me, Brandon. In my own house. She made spaghetti, Van. She's not running a coup." The kids quote her like she's gospel. They listen to her more than me. I work 50 hours a week and I come home and I'm the bad guy because Grandma's home all day baking. She's my mom. She's just trying to help. There's a difference between helping and taking over. She needs to remember her place. Her place. I lay in my bed and stared at the ceiling and waited for my son to defend me. To say, "Van, that's my mother, knock it off." To say anything. He didn't. And that was the night I understood that something had shifted, and there was no shifting it back. The next 3 years taught me how a person can become invisible while still living in the same house as the people who stopped seeing her. The humiliations got quieter and more constant. They were never the kind of thing you could point to. Nobody ever struck me or screamed at me. If you'd asked any neighbor, they'd have said I lived with a loving family in a beautiful home, and they'd have meant it. That's the thing about this particular cruelty, it leaves no marks, and it convinces you that you're imagining it, that you're being sensitive, that a grateful woman wouldn't keep count. But I kept count. Let me give you the count. There was the dinner party in the spring of the first year, when Vanessa's firm colleagues came over. I'd spent 2 days cooking, a standing rib roast, 3 sides, a lemon tart from scratch. When the guests complimented the food, Vanessa said, "Oh, thank you, I found the recipes. Not my mother-in-law made this. Not even we had help. I found the recipes." And then, as the evening went on and the wine flowed, one of her colleagues, a kind-faced woman named Patrice, asked who I was, and Vanessa said, "That's Brandon's mother. She helps out around the house." I stood there in my good blouse holding a tray of the coffee I'd brewed, and I watched Patrice's face do the small polite recalculation people do when they'd been talking to someone they'd just learned as staff, and then turn back to the table. I went into the kitchen and I did not come out again that night. There was the Christmas card. Every year Vanessa staged a photo by the tree, the 4 of them in matching flannel pajamas, the dog in a little Santa hat. And every year she handed me the camera. "You have such a steady hand, Margaret." I took the picture. I'm a good photographer, Walter taught me. That card went out to 200 people, framed on the mantle, posted online. I have looked through every photograph in that entire house, and I am not in a single one. 3 years of Thanksgivings and birthdays and first days of school, and you would not know, from any image in that home, that I had ever existed inside it. There was the time I had chest pains. This is the one that still catches in my throat. It was a Sunday afternoon, about 18 months in. I felt a pressure in my chest and a numbness down my left arm, and I got frightened, and I came into the great room where Vanessa was working on her laptop and Brandon was watching a game, and I said, "I don't feel well. I think I should maybe go to the doctor." Vanessa didn't look up from her screen. She said, "It's probably just gas, Margaret. Did you eat something heavy?" And Brandon, my own son, said, "You always think it's your heart, Mom. Remember last year?" And I stood there, and the pressure was real, and I was scared, and the two of them had already gone back to what they were doing. So I went up to my room and I lay down and I held my own hand because there was no one else to do it, and I told myself that if this was the night I died, at least it would be quiet. It passed. The doctor told me later when I finally went on my own, a warning, my blood pressure was dangerously high. But that afternoon taught me something I never unlearned. In that house, my body was not an emergency. My body was an inconvenience that might, at worst, interrupt the game. There was the matter of money, which I'll explain properly in a moment, but which announced itself in 100 small ways. The way Vanessa would come home with a new handbag that cost more than I spent on food in 3 months, and set it on the counter where I'd see it. The way she'd sigh about how tight things were on the first of the month, when she knew I'd take the hint and hand Brandon another envelope of cash. The way I started buying my own blood pressure medication in the cheapest generic and skipping doses to stretch it, while a $40 bottle of finishing oil sat on the counter that I wasn't allowed to cook with. And there was the slow erasure of my own opinions. I stopped offering them, because every one was met with that little flicker of irritation, that here she goes again. I stopped suggesting things for the children. I stopped mentioning when I was lonely, because loneliness, in that house, was treated as a kind of bad manners. I made myself agreeable. I made myself useful. I made myself quiet. And the quieter I got, the more invisible I became, until I genuinely began to wonder, on the bad nights, whether I was still a person at all or just a very efficient appliance that happened to have a name. I started to feel like a ghost. Worse, I started to act like one, drifting through rooms, keeping to the edges, making myself small so I wouldn't be in anyone's way. But here's the part one have to tell you, because it matters more than anything else in this story. Here's the part that none of them knew. Vanessa's career didn't take off on its own. When she made the jump from selling residential homes to commercial real estate, the move that eventually made her a partner, she needed money to get her license, take the courses, and float herself through the lean first year when she wasn't closing deals yet. She needed about $35,000. And she came to me, 2.5 years ago, sweet as sugar, sitting on the edge of my bed with a cup of tea she'd made special. It was the only time in 3 years she ever made me a cup of tea, and I should have known right then that something was being purchased. "Margaret, I would never ask if I weren't desperate," she'd said. "But you're the only one who believes in me. Brandon thinks I should stay in residential. He doesn't see what I see. If you could just lend me the startup money, I swear I'll pay you back the second I close my first commercial deal. With interest." I gave it to her. $35,000 out of my cushion. And I'll be honest with you, part of me did it because I wanted her to love me. I thought if I helped her chase the thing she wanted most, she'd finally let me in. I thought, this is the thing that will make her see me as family instead of furniture. That's the oldest, saddest hope there is, that if we just give enough, the people who don't value us will finally start. She never paid back a dime. And within a year, she'd stopped pretending she ever would. "It was a gift, Margaret," she said one day, breezy, when I gently raised it. "You said yourself you wanted to support family." I never said that. But I didn't have it in writing, did I? Or so she thought. Because what Vanessa didn't know, what she had no way of knowing, was that I came up in a clinic front office, where I spent 30 years learning that you write everything down, you keep every record, and you never, ever trust a verbal promise. It's the only reason that clinic survived 3 insurance audits and a malpractice suit while I was there. The lawyers used to call me the woman who keeps the receipts, and they meant it as the highest compliment, because twice my files saved the practice from ruin. Old habits don't die. They just go quiet and wait. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the night that woke me up. Let me tell you about the dinner. If you've ever given everything you had to people who treated it like nothing, this part is going to feel familiar. And if it does, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, because the women in these stories are the ones the world tried to make invisible, and we are not invisible anymore. Now let me tell you what happened that Tuesday night. It started that morning, in the kitchen, the way most things did. Vanessa came down the stairs already dressed for the office, in a charcoal suit I'd had dry cleaned the week before, her phone pressed to her ear, her heels clicking on the hardwood like a clock counting down. She hung up, and her whole face lit up, a real, genuine light, the kind I almost never saw on her anymore. "They're announcing it today," she said to Brandon, who was pouring cereal for Emma. "The partnership. Daniel called me himself. It's happening." Brandon swept her up off the floor. "I knew it. I knew they couldn't keep passing you over." The kids jeered. Emma banged her spoon on the table. It was, I'll admit, a lovely moment, and I stood at the stove flipping eggs and felt happy for her in spite of everything. That's the thing nobody tells you about being treated badly by people you love, it doesn't switch off the loving. I could be invisible to her and still be glad for her in the same breath. The heart is not a sensible organ. "Congratulations, Vanessa," I said, and I meant it. "That's wonderful news. You've worked so hard." She glanced at me, barely. "Thanks, Margaret." And turned back to Brandon. "We have to celebrate," Brandon said. "Properly. The Lakeview Chop House, the one with the view over the water. My treat." "Oh, can we, Daddy?" Emma squealed. "Can we get the chocolate thing?" "The whole family," Brandon said, scooping her up. "We're all going." The whole family. My heart did a small, foolish, hopeful thing. After 3 years, you'd think I'd have known better. But hope is a weed, it grows back no matter how many times you pull it. I set the eggs down and wiped my hands on my apron. "What time should I make the reservation for?" I asked. I'd made all their reservations for years. It was just one of the things I did. There was a pause. A small, terrible pause. Vanessa and Brandon traded one of those married people looks, and this one I read perfectly, because I'd gotten very good at reading the looks that decided what I was and wasn't allowed to be part of. "Oh, Margaret," Vanessa said, with a smile that stopped at her cheekbones. "It's really just going to be us tonight. The kids, and Daniel and a few people from the firm are joining, it's sort of a work thing, you know? Networking. It would be a little awkward." "I understand," I said, and turned back to the stove, though there was nothing left to cook. I pushed the empty pan around the burner just to have something to do with my hands. "Besides," Vanessa added, spreading jam on her toast, "somebody's got to be home for the dog, and you cook so much better than that restaurant anyway. You won't even miss it. You won't even miss it." As though being left behind were a kindness she was doing me. As though I should be grateful to be spared the inconvenience of my own family's celebration. Brandon said nothing. My son, the boy I'd raised, the boy I'd sat up with through fevers and nightmares and a broken heart at 16, the boy whose father I'd buried alone while he took a work call in the hallway, stared into his cereal bowl and said absolutely nothing. And I understood, watching the back of his bent head, that his silence had become the loudest thing in my life. Vanessa's cruelty I could almost forgive, she was a stranger who married in. But Brandon's silence was a betrayal with my own blood in it. They were gone by 6. Vanessa changed her outfit twice. I heard her ask Brandon the emerald or the black, and I could have told her the emerald, but nobody asked me. The kids wore their good clothes. Emma showed me her party shoes and asked if they were pretty, and I told her they were the prettiest shoes I'd ever seen, and I meant it, and she hugged me, and for 1 second I let myself pretend. Brandon kissed me on the cheek on his way out, quick and automatic, not meeting my eyes. "Don't wait up, Mom. We'll be late." And then the house was empty, and the silence came down like a curtain. I made the pot roast anyway. Out of habit, out of love, out of some stubborn refusal to stop being the person I was. I made it the way Brandon liked it as a boy, seared first, then slow, with the rosemary potatoes and the carrots cut on the bias the way Walter had taught me 40 years ago. I set it in the warming drawer. And then I sat down at the kitchen table, not the dining room, never the dining room, the help doesn't eat in the dining room, and I opened a can of tomato soup, because somehow I couldn't bring myself to eat the dinner I'd made for a family that didn't want me at their celebration. I sat there a long time. The soup went lukewarm and then cold. The house ticked and hummed around me. And I thought about Walter, and what he'd say if he could see me, his Maggie, eating soup alone in the corner of a kitchen that wasn't really hers. He'd be furious. Not at me, at them, and at himself for not being here to stop it. You let them do this to you, Maggie? I could hear him say it. And then, softer, no. You wouldn't. That's not my girl. And something in me, hearing his voice in my own head, sat up a little straighter. At 8:15 I made the mistake of opening Instagram. There they were. Vanessa in the emerald dress, holding up a glass of champagne. Brandon beside her, beaming. The kids with an enormous tower of fried shrimp. Daniel, her new partner, and 4 or 5 others from the firm, all of them laughing, all of them glowing in the candlelight with the lake shimmering behind them. The caption read, "Made partner at 39. To the people who believed in me and never let me settle. This one's for my family. Gemstone. The people who believed in me." I thought of the $35,000. I thought of the night she sat on the edge of my bed and called me the only one who believed in her. This one's for my family. I scrolled the comments, 206 likes in 40 minutes, a parade of yes queen and so deserved and what a gorgeous family, and I waited to feel the old familiar hurt, the porcelain cup crack in my chest. But it didn't come. Something else came instead. A cold, clear, almost peaceful steadiness, like the surface of a pond after the wind dies. I looked at that photograph of my family who'd built their joy on my back and toasted it without me, and I did not feel like crying. I felt like a woman who has finally, after a very long illness, woken up one morning and discovered the fever has broken. I closed the app. And then, at 8:47, my phone buzzed. "Margaret, heat up the dinner when you get a chance. Don't let it dry out. We'll be late." I read it 3 times. And something inside me, something that had been lying very still for 3 years, opened its eyes. I typed, "Okay." And then I went upstairs. The closet in the back bedroom, the one they used for storage, the one that smelled of cardboard and dust, held a box I'd put there the week we moved in, and never touched since. They thought it was full of Walter's old papers. It was, on top. But underneath the layer of his tax returns and warranty cards, there was a second box, a fireproof document case I'd bought with cash at an office supply store, and inside it was everything. I want to be clear about something. What I did next was not the work of a single furious night. It could not be. A furious night ends in a tantrum, a slammed door, a dramatic exit that has you crawling back in a week because you've got nowhere else to go and $40 in your purse. I had seen women do that, leave in a blaze and return in a whisper, weaker than before, having taught the people who hurt them only that the threats were empty. I was not going to give them that. I was not going to be a tantrum they could wait out. What I did next was the result of 10 months of quiet, patient, deliberate preparation. 10 months that began the morning I stood at the bus stop with Emma and overheard Vanessa, on the phone in the driveway, telling her sister, she's basically free labor. A live-in nanny, housekeeper, and cook, and I don't pay her a cent. Best decision we ever made. I had stood there at the corner with my granddaughter's small warm hand in mine, and something in me went very calm and very cold, and a voice in my head, Walter's voice, the clinic's voice, my own voice, finally, said, "Then start keeping the receipts again, Maggie." So I did. That very afternoon, while they were all out, I drove to the office supply store and bought the fireproof case and the cheap blue notebook and, after standing in the electronics aisle for a long while, a small voice recorder, $40, the kind a college student uses for lectures. I felt like a thief buying them, my heart going hard in my chest. And then I felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. I felt like a person with a plan. I sat on the bed and opened the document case, and I went through it the way I used to go through patient files, slow and careful, making sure everything was where it should be. First, the spiral notebook, a plain blue one, 99 cents, the kind a schoolchild uses. But every page was filled with my own handwriting, neat and small, going back almost 4 years. Every dollar I had put into that house. Not the down payment, the rest of it. Because here's what nobody ever asked, who do you think paid for the things a 5-bedroom house in Cedar Ridge needs? August, year 1. New washer and dryer. Because Vanessa said the old set was an embarrassment, $2,340. September. Living room furniture, the sectional and the chairs. $4,180. October. The kids' bunk beds and a new mattress for the guest room. $2,900. The next spring. Vanessa's must-have kitchen island and the quartz countertop she cried about. $7,600. On and on it went. The new roof when the old one leaked, $11,000, every penny of it mine, because Brandon's bonus hadn't come through yet. The furnace. The fence. The landscaping Vanessa wanted before her firm's summer party. The pool heater. The patio furniture. The window treatments she ordered 3 times because the first 2 weren't the right white. I turned the pages slowly under the lamp, and each one was a small grave. Not because of the money is only money, but because of what each line had cost me that wasn't dollars. The roof, the autumn I skipped my own dental work. The kitchen island, the Christmas I told the kids I didn't want anything. Each entry was a little piece of my old age I'd handed over and called it love. And then there were the monthly numbers, the ones that made my hand shake even now. The mortgage on that house was $2,650 a month. Brandon paid $900 of it, that was all he could manage on his salary after Vanessa's professional expenses. Vanessa, who out-earned him 3-to-1, paid nothing toward the house, her money went to her wardrobe, her car lease, her firm dinners. So who paid the other $1,750 every single month, for 3.5 years? I did. Out of my pension and Walter's, I handed Brandon $1,750 in cash on the 1st of every month, to help with things, because he asked, because he was my son, because I told myself a family helps each other. I never missed once. Not 1 month. There were months I ate rice and beans for a week to make it. There were months I told myself the heart palpitations were nothing because I couldn't spare the copay. I never missed. I sat on that bed and added it up on the last page of the notebook, the numbers swimming a little because my eyes were old and the lamp was dim. Furniture, appliances, and improvements, $61,420. Monthly mortgage help, 42 months at $1,750, $73,500. The $35,000 loan to Vanessa, $35,000. The original down payment, $90,000. Total, $259,920. Almost $260,000. More than I got for Walter's house and mine. More than 41 years of a shop teacher's salary and a clinic clerk's wages had managed to save. All of it poured into a house and a life where they texted me to heat up the dinner I wasn't invited to eat. But the notebook wasn't the powerful thing. The notebook was just the proof. The powerful thing was at the bottom of the case, in a sealed manila envelope, and it was 3 documents that were about to turn Vanessa's whole shining world upside down. The first document was the thing that nobody, not Brandon, not Vanessa, not their lawyer, if they ever got one, would see coming. When Vanessa came to me 2.5 years ago begging for that $35,000, I did not simply hand her cash like she remembered it. I'm a clinic clerk. I don't hand anyone money without paper. I drew up a 1-page promissory note on my old computer that very night, printed 2 copies, and the next morning I told her, and I'll never forget the way she rolled her eyes, that I needed her to sign it for my taxes, so the IRS doesn't think I gave you a gift. She laughed at me. She actually patted my hand, the way you'd pat a child who'd said something quaint. She thought I was a silly, fussy old woman who watched too many financial programs on television. She signed it without reading it, eager to get the check, and she never asked for it again because she assumed I'd lost it or forgotten it the way old women are supposed to lose and forget things. I did not lose it. The note was clear as glass. A loan of $35,000, to be repaid within 24 months, at 5% annual interest, secured against any property or asset of the borrower. Her signature was right there at the bottom, dated, and, because I do not do things halfway, witnessed and notarized by my friend Eleanor, who'd been a notary for years before she retired and who'd come over that afternoon for coffee with her stamp in her purse at my request. 2.5 years. With interest and the penalty clause for default, Vanessa now owed me just under $43,000, and she had no idea the paper even existed. The second document was the deed. Now, I know what you're thinking, because you know how these stories usually go. You're thinking I'm about to tell you the house is secretly in my name. It isn't. I want to be honest with you, because this is where my story is different. Brandon and Vanessa's names are both on that deed, free and clear. The house is legally theirs. I made sure of it, actually, because I wanted my son to have something solid in this world that no one could take from him. But the deed told me something else. When I'd quietly pulled the public record at the county office 8 months ago, anyone can, it costs $4 and a morning of your time, I saw that they'd refinanced the house the previous year. They'd pulled $40,000 of equity out of it. $40,000 of equity that existed only because I'd been paying 2/3 of the mortgage and every major improvement for 3 years. They'd taken that money built on my back, and Vanessa had used it as the personal investment she bragged about to her firm, the seed capital that supposedly proved she had skin in the game and got her fast-tracked to partner. In other words, the partnership she was toasting at the Lakeview Chop House that very night, the partnership she said was for the people who believed in her, was built on a foundation I had paid for, brick by brick, while she introduced me to her friends as the housekeeper. She had not just taken my money. She had taken my money, hidden where it came from, and used it to buy the very status that let her look down on me. I sat with that for a long moment. It was, I thought, almost a kind of art. And the third document, the third one was the quiet little earthquake. It was a letter, on letterhead, from a law firm downtown. Months earlier, I'd taken everything to a lawyer. Not a relative, not a family friend who might gossip, a stranger, a sharp young attorney named Priya Anand who specialized in elder financial abuse, recommended by Eleanor, who knew her from the Women's Center. I'd sat in her office on a rainy Wednesday with my fireproof case in my lap like a purse full of stolen jewels, and I'd laid it all out, and she'd listened without interrupting, taking notes, and at the end she'd taken off her glasses and said something I will never forget. "Mrs. Albright," she'd said, "I need you to understand the position you're actually in, because I don't think you do. You have a signed, secured, defaulted, notarized promissory note. You have meticulous, dated, contemporaneous records of $250,000 in transfers and improvements, frankly better records than most businesses keep. And under this state's elder financial exploitation statute, a documented pattern of an adult child or in-law extracting money and unpaid labor from a senior, combined with evidence of intent," she tapped the page where I'd transcribed the phone call about the free labor, "is not just a civil matter. It can be a criminal one. Do you understand what I'm telling you? You came in here thinking you were a houseguest who'd overstayed her welcome and was about to be a burden. You are nothing of the kind. You are a creditor. You are a documented victim. And those are two of the strongest positions a human being can occupy in front of a judge. The question is not whether you can do something. The question is what you want to do." The letter in the envelope was the demand letter Priya had drafted and was holding, ready to send the moment I gave the word. It laid out the note, the interest, the documented contributions, and it requested, formally, with citations to the statute, repayment and a full accounting, with a clear and very polite implication of what would follow if the request were refused. I had not given the word yet. I'd been waiting, the way you wait for a fever to break, the way you wait to be sure. Tonight, I was sure. I also had one more thing, and it was the thing that made all the rest of it impossible to wriggle out of. For 10 months, in a kitchen where people had long ago stopped noticing I was alive, I had been recording. The little voice recorder, $40, slipped into my apron pocket every morning the way another woman might put on earrings. Because when you become invisible, people say the truest and ugliest things right in front of you, as if you were a lamp. They forget you can hear. They forget you're a person who remembers. I had Vanessa telling her sister I was free labor. I had her, late one night through the wall, telling Brandon that when she's too old to be useful, we put her in Sunny Pines and rent out her room. I had her laughing with 2 friends over wine in the great room about how she'd talked the old lady out of 35 grand and called it a gift. Honestly, it's the best return on investment I've ever made. I had her telling the children, when Emma cried because I was sad one evening, "Grandma's just being dramatic, sweetheart, old people get like that." 17 files in all. I'd copied them to 3 USB drives and emailed a set to myself and a set to Priya. Belt and suspenders, the clinic taught me. Never one copy of anything that matters. I sat on the bed with all of it spread around me in the lamplight, the notebook, the note, the deed record, the letter, the little recorder, and for the first time in 3 years, I did not feel small. I felt like a woman who was holding the whole deck of cards while everyone else thought they were playing with a full hand. I checked the time. 9:20, their stories showed they were on dessert, the chocolate tower Emma had wanted, $30 a slice. I had 2 hours, maybe 3. Enough. I went to my own room and I packed. Not everything, just what was mine, what was truly, indisputably mine. Walter's photograph from the nightstand, the one of him at the lake squinting into the sun. The quilt my mother stitched, the one Vanessa always called that old thing and once tried to donate without asking. My grandmother's silver hand mirror, tarnished at the edges. My books, the worn paperbacks, the Bible with the pressed flowers from my wedding. The coffee press I'd brought from Birchwood Lane that Vanessa had banished to the back of a cupboard because it cluttered the counter. My good winter coat. The recipe box, every card in my mother's handwriting and then mine. I did not feel sad. I felt the lightest I'd felt in years, light enough that my bad knees hardly mattered. I called a car from the corner so it wouldn't wake the dog or alert the neighbors. While I waited at the end of the driveway in the dark with my suitcase, I looked up at the stars, which you could actually see out in Cedar Ridge, and I said, out loud, quietly, "I'm going, Walter." I should have gone a long time ago. And I swear the wind moved through the trees like a man letting out a breath he'd been holding. The driver, a kind young man, loaded my suitcase. "Long trip tonight, ma'am?" he asked, pulling away. I looked back at the house as we left it, its windows dark, the porch light I always left on glowing yellow in the night, the only light I'd leave them. "No," I said. "A short one. I'm just going home." I wasn't there when they got back. But Tyler told me everything 4 days later, sitting in Eleanor's kitchen with tears running down his face and a cup of cocoa going cold in front of him, and I'm going to tell it the way my grandson told it to me, because some things you have to hear from the people who were in the room. It was almost 1 a.m. when Brandon's SUV pulled into the driveway in Cedar Ridge. They were loose and laughing, the kids half asleep in the back. Vanessa had had a glass too many of champagne and was leaning on Brandon's shoulder, still glowing from her night, already talking about the corner office she'd get and the assistant she'd be assigned. "Partner," Brandon kept saying, kissing the top of her head. "My wife, the partner." They came in through the garage, flipped on the lights, expecting what they always expected, the house warm and clean, the dinner kept ready, the old woman either asleep upstairs or, better yet, awake and waiting to ask them how the night had been so she could fuss over the children and take the tired ones off their hands. But the house was wrong. The first thing Vanessa noticed, Tyler said, was the silence. No dog greeting them at the door. I'd left him with the neighbor, with a note explaining. No light under my bedroom door. And the kitchen was spotless, but the little things were gone. My coffee press from the back of the cupboard. My apron, the one that always hung on the hook by the pantry like part of the architecture. The hand-stitched dish towels my mother had made, the ones Vanessa hated. Small absences. The kind you feel before you can name. Margaret? Brandon called up the stairs. No answer. Vanessa went up first, weaving a little on her heels. She pushed open my bedroom door and turned on the light, and Tyler, who'd woken when the car doors slammed and crept to the top of the stairs in his pajamas, said his mother just stood there in the doorway, very still, the champagne glow draining out of her. The bed was made, perfectly made, hospital corners, the way I always left it. But the closet door stood open, and the closet was empty. The nightstand was bare. Walter's photograph was gone, the quilt was gone, the silver mirror, the books, everything that said a person lived there had been lifted out, clean as a whisper, as if I had never existed in that room at all. Only the hangers were left, swaying a little from the movement of the door, making the small empty sound that hangers make. Where is she? Vanessa said, and Tyler said her voice had gone strange and high, not a voice he knew. Brandon. Brandon, where's your mother? Brandon came up the stairs 2 at a time, suddenly very sober. He went into my empty room. He went into the bathroom, my toothbrush gone, my creams, my cheap rose hand lotion, all gone. He came back into the hall with his face the color of paper. Mom, he kept saying, louder, opening doors that had nothing behind them. The linen closet. The guest room. The office. Mom? As if I might be hiding. As if a 71-year-old woman might be crouched in a cabinet somewhere, playing a game. It was Vanessa who found the letter, because Vanessa always went to the kitchen. The kitchen was the seat of her power, the room she ran like a small kingdom. She saw the white envelope and the yellow sticky note on the granite island, and Tyler said he came halfway down the stairs and watched his mother pick up the sticky note and read it. He said his mother made a sound he had never heard a person make. A short, sharp sound, like something breaking that was supposed to be solid. Brandon. Her voice was barely there. Brandon, come down here. Now. He came. She handed him the sticky note. Tyler watched his father read it, watched his father's face travel from confusion to disbelief to something that looked, my grandson said, like when you miss a step in the dark and your stomach drops before you even know you're falling. 42,000? Brandon said. What note? Van, what loan is she talking about? What recordings? And here, Tyler said, his mother got very, very quiet. Which was the loudest thing of all, because Vanessa was never quiet. Brandon opened the envelope with clumsy fingers. He took out the notebook first, and he turned the pages, and Tyler said his father sat down right there on a kitchen stool, in his good suit with his tie loosened, and started reading numbers out loud in a voice that didn't sound like his. New roof, 11,000. Furnace, 6,000. Master bath, 7,600. Van, 42 months of mortgage at $1,750, he stopped. Tyler heard him do the arithmetic, heard the long pause. That's $73,000. She paid $73,000 of our mortgage. In cash. For 3.5 years. Where did she, how did she even, he looked up, and his eyes had changed. Did you know about this? Vanessa didn't answer. She had the promissory note in her hands now, and she was staring at her own signature at the bottom of it, the signature she'd scrawled without reading while she reached for the check. I forgot I signed this, she whispered. She said it was for taxes. I didn't, it was supposed to be a gift, I never thought she'd actually. You borrowed $35,000 from my mother? Brandon's voice cracked down the middle. For your license? You told me that money came from your savings. You looked me in the eye and told me you'd been saving for years. He stopped. He'd found the refinance record, and the sticky notes words were clicking into place behind his eyes one by one, like tumblers in a lock. The equity. The 40,000. The personal investment you put into the firm, the one you're so proud of, the one in your partner bio, Van. That equity only existed because she paid the mortgage and paid for the roof that made the house worth refinancing. You built your partnership on my mother's money. And you let her cook our dinners and call her the housekeeper. The silence in that kitchen, Tyler said, was the loudest thing he'd ever heard in his life. And then Vanessa, cornered, did the thing that cornered people always do. She turned the fear into anger and threw it outward. So what? Her voice came back, sharp and high. So she helped. That's what family does, Brandon. She offered. All of it. And now what, she's threatening us? With a lawyer? Sneaking around recording us in our own house like a spy? This is sick. This is manipulative. This is exactly the kind of guilt-tripping, martyr. Stop. Brandon had found the last item in the envelope. A USB drive, and clipped to it, a note in my hand, play me. Headphones on. Alone. He didn't wait, and he didn't put on headphones. He took the laptop off the counter, the one Vanessa used for work, and he plugged the drive in with shaking hands, and he hit play on the first file. And Vanessa's own voice came out of the little speakers, bright and careless, from a phone call 10 months before, perfectly clear. She's basically free labor, staff. A live-in nanny, housekeeper, and cook, and I don't pay her a cent. Best decision we ever made. And honestly the best part, when she's too old to be useful, we just put her in a home and rent out the room. It practically pays for itself. Brandon feels guilty sometimes but he gets over it. Tyler said the kitchen went so still he could hear the refrigerator and the clock and his own heart. Brandon turned and looked at his wife, and Tyler said it was the first time in his whole life he'd ever seen his father look at his mother like he was looking at a stranger who'd broken into the house. Turn it off, Vanessa said. He played the next one. Her voice again, lower, the late-night through-the-wall conversation, I'm just saying, when the dementia starts, Sunny pines, and we take the room back. She's had a good run, Brandon. She served her purpose. Turn it off, Brandon. He turned it off. He set the laptop down very gently, the way you set down something you're afraid you'll throw. He sat back on the stool and put his face in his hands, and Tyler, 10 years old, in his pajamas on the stairs, watched his father's shoulders begin to shake. What have we done? Brandon said into his palms, over and over. What have we done? What have I let you do? What did I do? That was when Tyler couldn't hold it in anymore and came the rest of the way down the stairs crying, asking where Grandma was, why was Daddy crying, and the noise woke Emma, who appeared at the top of the stairs in her party dress she'd fallen asleep in, calling, I want Grandma, where's Grandma, I want Grandma in the thin high voice of a child who's woken into a nightmare. And the whole house came apart at 1 o'clock in the morning, exactly the way I'd written that note hoping my grandchildren wouldn't have to see. That was the one thing I got wrong in 10 months of careful planning. I thought a folded letter on a counter could keep a child upstairs and asleep. It couldn't. You cannot fold a note thick enough to muffle the sound of a family breaking. But I didn't know any of that yet. That night, while their world fell in on itself 3 miles away, I was under my mother's quilt in Eleanor's spare room, drinking chamomile tea with honey, the lamp soft and the sheets clean and smelling of lavender, sleeping the first full, dreamless, unafraid sleep I'd had in 3 years. I want to stop here for just a moment, because if you've come this far, you might be one of the people I'm really telling this to. I woke at 7 in Eleanor's spare room with sunlight on the wall and the smell of coffee drifting up the stairs, and for a moment I didn't know where I was, and then I remembered, and I lay still and let myself feel it all the way through, nobody downstairs waiting to be served. Nobody about to inspect my folding or my mopping. No orders dressed up as suggestions. No Margaret in that clipped cool voice. Just sunlight, and coffee, and a Wednesday that belonged entirely to me. My phone had 41 notifications. 26 missed calls from Brandon. Texts from numbers I didn't recognize, relatives, probably, already buzzing. 4 from Vanessa. I didn't open them. Instead I went downstairs, and Eleanor had made eggs and bacon and biscuits and the strong coffee I liked, and she set a plate in front of me and looked at me over her glasses and said, "Eat. You've got a war to fight and you can't fight it hungry." And I laughed, really laughed, from the belly, for the first time in longer than I could remember, so hard that Eleanor started laughing too, and the two of us sat in her little kitchen, two old widows, laughing until we cried, which is its own kind of medicine. Priya called at 9. The letter went out by certified mail and email at 8 a.m., she said. Read receipt confirms it's been opened. So they know. I expect we'll hear from them, or their lawyer, within 48 hours. Now, Margaret, I want to walk you through your options carefully, because you have more leverage than almost any client I have ever represented, and the only question that matters now is what you actually want. Not what the law allows. What you want. I'm listening. Option 1 is the hard road. We sue. The note alone is a slam dunk, signed, secured, notarized, defaulted. You collect the $43,000 with interest and there's not a thing they can do about it. But with the contributions and especially the recordings, we have a genuinely strong elder financial exploitation case. We could pursue civil damages well into 6 figures, and given the documentation, we'd likely win. And honestly? She paused, choosing her words. Given what's on those recordings, the explicit intent to keep the loan under false pretenses, the stated plan to institutionalize you in order to take your room, I have an ethical obligation to tell you that I could refer this to the district attorney. Elder financial abuse is a felony in this state. There is a real, non-trivial chance your daughter-in-law could face criminal charges. She could, in a serious case, do time. I sat with that for a long moment, looking out Eleanor's window at her bird feeder, where 2 cardinals were arguing over the seed. The power of it. I could put Vanessa in a courtroom. I could, very possibly, put her somewhere far worse than a courtroom. The woman who'd planned to put me away when I was no longer useful, I could put her away. There was a justice in that so clean and symmetrical it almost took my breath. What are the other options? Option 2, we settle privately, no court. They repay the note and a negotiated portion of your contributions, on a schedule, in writing, with the recordings and records held in escrow as your insurance. You walk away whole financially, you never set foot in a courtroom, and you hold the leverage permanently. Clean, quiet, complete. And option 3? Priya was quiet for a moment. Option 3 is whatever you want it to be, Margaret. That's the part most people in your position never understand, so I'm going to say it as plainly as I can. You hold all the cards. All of them. Which means you don't have to play the hand the way the law would play it. You can choose mercy. You can choose terms that aren't about money at all, terms designed to make them understand something instead of just pay something. You can do something no court could ever order them to do. The power isn't in the lawsuit, Margaret. The lawsuit is just the proof of the power. The power itself is in the choice. And the choice is yours alone. I thanked her and told her I needed a day to think. And I did think. I walked Eleanor's neighborhood that afternoon, slow, my hands behind my back the way Walter used to walk, and I turned it over and over. Revenge would be so easy. It was right there, gift-wrapped, deserved. But every time I imagined Vanessa in handcuffs, I imagined Emma watching it happen. Every time I imagined the courtroom, I imagined Tyler in the gallery, learning that this is how his family ends. And I found, somewhat to my own surprise, that I did not want to be the woman who taught those children that the answer to cruelty is destruction. I'd spent my whole life feeding them. I was not going to feed them that. When I got back, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened Facebook, the account I almost never used, for hundred-some friends I'd collected and forgotten, old neighbors and book club women and clinic coworkers and cousins scattered across the country. And I wrote a post. Just a few lines, typed slowly with one finger. For 3 years I lived in my son's house and slowly stopped being a person and started being a service. I cooked, I cleaned, I raised the grandchildren, I paid more than my share of everything, and I was introduced to guests as the housekeeper. Last night I left, with one suitcase and my dignity. I'm 71 years old and I'm starting over, and I want to say one thing to every woman my age who has made herself small to keep the peace: you are allowed to take up space. Your dignity is not a luxury you outgrow. Self-respect is not selfishness. It is survival. It is never too late. I hit post, and I closed the app, and I went and helped Eleanor weed her garden because I couldn't bear to watch it. When I came back inside 2 hours later, the post had 240 reactions and over 100 comments, and the comments undid me completely. Woman after woman, story after story, the dam breaking all at once. Margaret, I've lived in my daughter's basement for 4 years and I cook and clean and watch the kids and I have not been thanked once in all that time. My mother went through exactly this. She died feeling like a burden and I will never forgive myself for not seeing it while she was alive. Thank you for what you wrote. I'm calling my therapist. You just put into words a thing I have felt for 6 years and could never say. I'm 68. I think I'm going to leave. I'm a daughter-in-law and I just read this to my husband and we both cried because we recognized ourselves and we are going to do better starting today. 12 women sent me private messages. One of them, a woman named Carol in another state I'd never met, wrote, I'm calling a lawyer tomorrow because of your post. I've been afraid for 2 years. You went first. Now I can go too. God bless you. I sat in Eleanor's kitchen and read every one of them twice, and I understood something then that started to change what I thought I wanted. My little story, my private pain, the soup going cold in a corner of a kitchen, it was not mine alone. It had never been mine alone. It belonged to all of us, the whole quiet uncounted army of women who'd given everything and been handed a grocery list. And if my story belonged to all of them, then how it ended belonged to all of them too. And I did not want it to end in handcuffs. I wanted it to end in a way that taught something. I wanted it to end in a way that one of those women could read and think, yes. That's what I'll do. Brandon came to Eleanor's door at 6 that evening. Eleanor blocked it like a small fierce sentry, arms crossed. She's resting, Brandon. She'll see you when she's good and ready and not 1 minute before, and if you raise your voice on my porch you'll see the back of this door so fast it'll part your hair. But I heard his voice break when he said Mom through the doorway, and something in me, the something that carried him for 9 months and 40 years and never did learn how to stop, said, let him in. It's all right, Eleanor, I called. Let him come in. He looked terrible. He'd aged 10 years overnight. Unshaven, gray under the eyes, in the same wrinkled shirt from the night before with the tie gone. He sat on Eleanor's little floral sofa and he could barely look at me, and his hands kept moving in his lap like they didn't know what to do without something to hold. I listened to all of it, he said. Every file. It took me 4 hours and I had to keep stopping. I sat in the garage so the kids wouldn't hear. I threw up once. He pressed his lips together. Mom, I didn't know about the loan. I swear on Dad's grave I didn't know about the $35,000. I thought her startup money was her savings. She lied to me about it for 3 years, to my face. And the things she said on those recordings, about a home, about renting out your room, his voice gave out entirely. I didn't know she thought that. I didn't know she said that. I would never. And the mortgage, Brandon? I asked, gently, because this was the question I needed answered more than any other, the one I'd carried for 3 years. You didn't know about the loan, all right. But you knew about the mortgage. You took $1,750 in cash from my hand on the first of every month for 3.5 years. 42 times. Did you ever once, in 42 months, wonder how I was living on what was left? He flinched as if I'd slapped him. And then, to his credit, and this is the moment I knew there might be something left to save, he didn't make an excuse. He looked at the floor and he told the truth. No, he whispered. I never wondered. I just took it. Every month I told myself you wanted to help, that you had plenty, that it made you happy to feel useful. I built a whole story so I'd never have to ask the real question. And I never asked you a single real thing in 3 years, did I? Not how you slept. Not if you were lonely. Not if you missed Dad. Not if your heart was bothering you. God, that afternoon you said you weren't feeling well and I said you always think it's your heart. Mom, what if it had been? What if he couldn't finish. It nearly was, I said quietly. The doctor told me later. My blood pressure was so high it was dangerous. I held my own hand that afternoon, Brandon, because there was no one in that house who would. He started to cry then, the way he used to cry as a small boy, with his whole body, no dignity in it at all. And I'll tell you something I didn't expect, it did not give me 1 ounce of the satisfaction I'd imagined on all those silent nights. None. It just hurt. Because that was still my son falling apart on a stranger's sofa, and a mother does not stop being a mother just because her child broke her heart. The love doesn't have an off switch. I've looked. There isn't one. What do you want, Mom? He finally managed, scrubbing his face with both hands. The note, we'll pay all of it, I'll sell my truck, I'll find the money. And whatever the right number is for the rest. Priya's letter is, it's all true, every word, I'm not going to fight any of it. Vanessa wants to fight it. She's already got the name of some lawyer. But I told her, he stopped, and his jaw set in a way I hadn't seen since he was a boy deciding something. I told her if she fights you, if she puts you through 1 day of court, I'm done. I mean it. I heard what she said about you. I've been hearing it on a loop for 24 hours. I can't unhear it, and I won't pretend to. And there it was. The first time in 3 years my son had drawn a line in the sand and put me on the right side of it. It came 3 years too late. But it came. Don't divorce her over a recording, Brandon, I said, and I watched my own words surprise him. Not for me. And not in front of those children. Your wife did a cruel and calculated thing, and I'm not going to tell you it wasn't. But I don't think she was born cruel. Did you know her mother cleaned houses her whole life? That Vanessa grew up watching wealthy women treat her mother like she was part of the furniture, talk over her, correct her, introduce her to guests as the girl who does for us? He stared at me. She never, how do you know that? She told me once. Early on, before she decided I was the enemy, in a soft moment. A girl who claws her way up out of being looked down on will sometimes turn around and look down on the first person beneath her, just to prove to herself that she really got out, that she's the one giving the orders now, not the one taking them. It isn't an excuse, Brandon. There is no excuse. But it's the reason, and the reason is the only thing you can actually work with. You can't fix a person you don't understand. I leaned forward and took my son's hands in both of mine, the hands I'd held when they were the size of walnuts. I'm not going to send your wife to jail, I said. I could. Priya tells me I really, genuinely could, and that she'd probably win. But I don't want to win that way. I don't want to win at all, actually, winning is for enemies, and I didn't come into your family to make enemies. I refuse, ever again, to be invisible inside this family. That's the only thing I won't bend on. So here is what I want. And it isn't money, although there will be money, because I am an old woman and I have decided I intend to spend the rest of my life comfortable and free, and I have more than earned it. Anything, he said. Whatever it is. Tell me. Go home and read Priya's letter all the way through, with Vanessa, calmly, when the children are at school. And then tell her I want to meet. Not with lawyers shouting across a table. The 4 of us, you, me, Vanessa, and Priya, who'll be there to keep everyone honest and put it in writing. And I will tell you all, to your faces, exactly what justice is going to look like. Because I've decided. I decided this afternoon, reading what 100 strangers wrote to me. And it's going to surprise every one of you. We met 3 days later, in Priya's small conference room downtown, with its one window full of flat gray winter sky and a pitcher of water nobody touched. I got there first, with Priya beside me in a sharp navy suit, her briefcase full of documents she was quietly hoping she wouldn't have to use. At 10 o'clock exactly, Brandon and Vanessa came in. Brandon looked hollowed out, scraped clean from the inside. But it was Vanessa who stopped me in my chair, because she was not the woman I'd lived with for 3 years. The Vanessa I knew was all armor, the tailored suit, the 4-inch heels, the chin lifted just slightly, the cool little smile that put you in your place before you'd finished saying hello. This Vanessa wore a plain gray sweater and flat shoes and no makeup that I could see, and her eyes were swollen nearly shut from crying, and she sat down across from me and folded her hands and would not, lift her gaze from the table. "Mrs. Albright," she said, and her voice was nothing like the bright careless voice on the recordings. It was small and scraped and very young. "Margaret. Thank you for agreeing to meet us. You didn't have to. After everything, you didn't have to do anything at all." Priya laid it out first, cool and precise, the way only a good lawyer can, so that no one in the room could pretend afterward that they hadn't understood. The note, $42,900, signed, notarized, secured, in default. The documented contributions, $225,000 in money, not counting 3.5 years of unpaid domestic labor, which a court would value at another $60,000 at prevailing rates. The 17 recordings. The Elder Financial Exploitation Statute, with its civil exposure and, Priya let the word sit in the middle of the table like a stone, its criminal exposure. "I want both of you to fully understand this situation before my client tells you what she has decided," Priya said. "Mrs. Albright is in a position to take very nearly everything you own, and to refer a matter to the district attorney that could result in criminal charges against Mrs. Albright." She nodded at Vanessa, carrying real jail time. "I want to be clear that I advised her of all of this in detail. I also want to be clear that what she is about to offer you is a very great deal less than the law would give her, and a kind of mercy that I, as her attorney, advised against." She overruled me. "She is going to tell you why herself." Then she sat back, and folded her hands, and it was my turn. "Vanessa," I said. "Look at me, please." She looked up. Her chin was trembling, and a tear spilled over and ran down her cheek, and she let it, didn't wipe it, didn't perform it. "I'm not going to take your house," I said. "I'm not going to take your partnership, though God knows it stands on a foundation I paid for with money I made skipping my own medicine. And I am not going to send you to jail, although I want you to sit very still for a moment and understand all the way to the bottom that I could, that the only reason I won't is a choice I am making freely, right now, in this room, because I am not, and have never been, the kind of person you spent 3 years telling yourself I was." The tears came faster now. She nodded, once, a small broken motion. "Here's what is going to happen instead," I said, and I laid it out the way I'd planned it, point by point. First, the loan. $43,000. You will repay it in full, to me, over 5 years, with the interest, on a written schedule Priya will draw up. Not Brandon, you. From your partner's draw, the one you built on my money. Every single month, you will sit down and write me a check with your own hand, and every single month you will be reminded exactly whose belief in you paid for the dream you took the credit for. That's not punishment. That's just the truth, made into a habit, the way you made my invisibility into a habit." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes. Of course. Every month." Second, the contributions. The $225,000. I am not going to demand it back, because demanding it would mean selling the house out from under Tyler and Emma, and I will not do that to my grandchildren to punish their mother. But I slid a single page across the table. "Priya has drawn up a lien, a legal claim against the house for that full amount, recorded against the deed. It is repayable only under 2 conditions, if you ever sell the house, or," and here I waited until Vanessa met my eyes, "if either of you ever again, moves to put me in a facility against my will, or treats me, or any older person living under your roof, the way I was treated in that house. As long as you both behave like decent human beings, you will never pay 1 cent of it, and it will simply sit there, quiet, like I used to. The day you don't, it comes due in full, immediately, with interest. Consider it the price of my trust, held in escrow against your character. Brandon nodded slowly, his jaw tight. Vanessa pressed her hand flat against her mouth. Third, I said, and this is the one that matters most to me, so I want you both to listen with your whole attention. You are not going to see me as the help anymore. In fact, you're not going to see me at all anymore, not as a resident, anyway, because I am not coming back to live in that house. I have my own apartment now. 2 rooms and a kitchen and a door that locks, near Eleanor, with no one in it who wasn't invited. I'm going to live out the rest of my days as a visible woman in a place that is mine. But you, Vanessa, you are going to learn what you put me through. Not from a lecture. From living it. Because I am giving the spare room in your house, my old room, to someone who needs it. She frowned, lost. I don't, what do you mean? There's a woman at the senior center where Eleanor volunteers, I said. Her name is Dolores Reyes. She's 68 years old. She was a labor and delivery nurse for 40 years, she has, by her own estimate, caught over 3,000 babies. Last spring her son and his wife put her out of their house with 2 suitcases and a one-way bus ticket, because, in their words, she had served her purpose. She has nowhere to go and a tiny pension and more dignity in her left hand than the 3 of us sitting here have between us. She is going to move into your house, into my old room, on a real written lease that I am going to hold, at a fair rent that comes directly to me. She will share your kitchen, your living room, your table, and your life. The room was completely silent. Outside, the gray sky pressed against the window. And you, Vanessa, are going to be kind to her, I said. You are going to fold Dolores into that family the way you should have folded in me. You are going to let her cook in your kitchen, and help with the children if she wants to, and have opinions at the dinner table, and take up as much space as she pleases. And you are going to learn, slowly, the hard way, the only way anyone ever really learns anything, exactly what it costs to share your home with someone you didn't choose, and exactly what it gives back to you when you decide to treat her like a human being anyway. That is not a punishment, Vanessa. It is an education. And it is the only thing I want from you that no amount of money could ever buy. Vanessa was weeping openly now, the careful armor gone completely, nothing left but a frightened woman in a gray sweater. And fourth, I said, and now my own voice finally cracked, because I'd been saving this one, Brandon. You and I are going to go to family counseling. Once a week, for 6 months, just the 2 of us, no Vanessa. I will pay for the first 10 sessions. You will pay for the rest. Because I lost 3 years with my only son, and I am 71 years old, and I do not have so many years left that I can afford to spend any more of them being angry at the boy I love. I'd rather spend them getting him back. Brandon stood up from his chair, came around the table, and knelt down on the floor in front of me, and put his head in my lap the way he had when he was 4 years old and the world was too big, and he wept. And I stroked his hair, the same hair I'd combed before 1,000 school mornings, and I let him. And over the top of my son's bent head, I looked at Vanessa. Why? Vanessa whispered. Why would you do this? Any of it? After what if I were you, I would have destroyed me. I would have made sure I lost everything. Why are you giving me a chance? Because I gain nothing by destroying you, I said. Watch me close, now, because this is the only wisdom I've got and I'd like it to land. Revenge wants you to suffer. It wants to make you as small as you made me, and then walk away feeling even. But I tried being small, Vanessa, for 3 years, and I can tell you it doesn't make anyone bigger. Justice is different. Justice doesn't want you to suffer. Justice wants you to understand. And then, this is the part that's almost too much to ask of a person, justice wants to give you the chance to become someone who would never do it again. I'm too old and too tired for revenge. But it turns out I've got just exactly enough time left for justice. So that's what you're getting. Don't waste it. I won't pretend it was easy after that, or that everyone turned into a better person overnight, because real life doesn't fold up as neat as a fairy tale and I promised you the truth. But I'll tell you what happened, because the what happened is the entire point of my telling you any of this at all. Dolores Reyes moved into my old room on the 1st of February. The first month was rocky as a gravel road, and I won't pretend otherwise. Vanessa, 3 years deep in the habit of being the queen of her kitchen, bristled every time Dolores so much as filled the kettle. There was a standoff over the good olive oil, the very same $12 bottle, that Dolores ended by pouring a generous glug of it into her cooking and saying, "Mija, oil is for using. What good is it sitting on a shelf being expensive?" There was a tense negotiation about the thermostat. There was a morning Vanessa came down to find Dolores had rearranged the spice cabinet so a person can actually find the cumin, and I am told the silence at breakfast could have frosted the windows. But here is the thing about putting a woman who flatly refuses to be invisible into a house that is accustomed to making people invisible. The house has to change, because she will not. And Dolores would not. She'd spent 40 years standing toe-to-toe with surgeons twice her size and 3 times her salary. She was not about to be made small by a 39-year-old in a kitchen. When Vanessa, early on, made a sharp little comment about the smell of Dolores's cooking, Tyler told me Dolores just looked at her, calm as Sunday, and said, "Honey, I pay my rent on the 1st, same as the bank gets its mortgage. You'll get used to the smell of my pozole, or you won't, but either way I'm making a big pot of it this Sunday and there'll be a bowl for anyone with the sense to want one." And then she went right on chopping. And slowly, the way the tide goes out, so gradual you can't catch it moving, things shifted. Dolores helped Emma with her reading every evening, the two of them on the sofa with a book between them. She taught Tyler to play cribbage, and then beat him soundly 40 games in a row before she let him win one, so it would mean something. She held her ground with Vanessa, kindly but completely, and Vanessa, who had clawed her way up out of poverty by being the hardest, sharpest, most unyielding person in every single room she entered, met, perhaps for the first time in her entire life, a woman she could not make smaller, and discovered, slowly, that she didn't actually want to. Tyler told me about the night it turned. It was a Thursday in March. Dolores had made far too much dinner, the way nurses and grandmothers always do, and Vanessa came home late and gray-faced from a deal that had collapsed at the closing table, a big one, the kind that would have made her year. And instead of complaining about the kitchen, or the noise, or the smell, she just stopped in the doorway, and looked at the steam rising off the pots, and something in her gave way. She sat down at Dolores's table and put her face in her hands and started to cry, not pretty crying, the real kind. And Dolores, who'd held the hands of frightened laboring mothers for 4 decades, didn't say a word about it. She just set a bowl down in front of Vanessa and put one warm hand on her shoulder and said, "Eat first. We'll talk after. Everything in this world is smaller after you've eaten something hot." And Vanessa ate. And then she talked. She told Dolores everything, about her mother who'd cleaned houses, about the women who'd looked straight through her when she was a girl carrying her mother's bucket, about the bottomless terror that someone would one day see past the partnership and the granite countertops and the tailored suits to the scared poor kid underneath who still didn't believe she was allowed in the room. And Dolores said the thing, Tyler told me, the thing nobody had ever once said to Vanessa in her whole hard climbing life. "You don't have to be the hardest person in the room to deserve to be in it, baby. You're allowed to just be in it. That's enough. You were always enough." Vanessa started individual therapy that spring, her own idea, not a condition I'd set. She started paying me back, every month, on time, a check in her own handwriting just as I'd asked. And the notes she clipped to the checks got longer and warmer as the seasons turned. In February it was just a number. By April it said thank you for not giving up on this family when you had every right to. By July, I think about my mother every day now. I called her last week and we talked for 2 hours, the first real talk we've had in 20 years. I have you to thank for that too. By October, I told a junior agent at the firm yesterday that her work was good, and I watched her stand up a little straighter, and I thought, that's what it costs to make someone visible. Nothing. It costs nothing. How did I not know that it costs nothing? Brandon and I went to counseling every Thursday, in a quiet office with a box of tissues we both used. The first session, we cried the entire hour and barely said 10 useful words. By the fifth, we were arguing honestly about real things, which the therapist said was progress. By the 10th, we were laughing about a disastrous fishing trip he'd taken with his father in 1994, when Walter hooked his own hat and swore the lake had tried to drown it. Brandon started calling me, not about logistics, not about the kids' schedules, but just to ask how I was. Whether my knees were aching in the cold. Whether I was eating enough, sleeping all right, taking my blood pressure medication, the real kind now, the name brand, because I could afford it. He came to my little apartment on Sundays and we cooked together, the way we had when he was a boy standing on a stool at the counter on Birchwood Lane, and one Sunday over the pot roast he said, quietly, not looking up from the carrots, "I'm sorry it took losing you to find you again, Mom." And I said, "Well, you found me. That's the part that counts." And we left it there, because some things don't need saying twice. The grandchildren came every single Sunday. We'd go to the park, get ice cream, feed the ducks at the pond near Eleanor's. They had Dolores at home and me on weekends, and somehow, in the strange and generous arithmetic of children, they came out of the whole catastrophe richer instead of poorer, 2 grandmothers instead of 1, and a mother who was, week by week, learning to be softer. And the women from Facebook, the women never stopped. That one little post got shared, and shared again, and within a month over 300 women had written to me with their own versions of my story. Dozens told me that my going first had given them the courage to leave, or to set a boundary, or simply to say out loud, for the first time in years, "This is not all right, and I deserve better than this." A women's advocacy group that worked on elder financial abuse asked me to come speak at their spring luncheon, and I did, in a borrowed blazer, with my notes shaking in my hands and my reading glasses sliding down my nose. And when I finished, a whole room of women rose to their feet, and I had to stop and take off my glasses and just stand there a moment, because I could not see them through the tears, all those visible, valuable, unbroken women on their feet. My pain, it turned out, was never only mine. It belonged to all of us, the invisible ones, the ones who gave everything and were handed a grocery list and a guest room and a text that said heat up the dinner. And the moment I refused, just once, to disappear, I gave a few hundred other women permission to refuse too. That, more than the note, more than the lien, more than every dollar, is the thing I am proudest of in this whole long life. It's been a year and a half now since the night I packed one suitcase and walked out the front door of a house I'd paid for and into my own life. I'm 72. I live in my own apartment, 2 rooms, a kitchen that's mine alone, and a window that gets the morning sun and a view of a maple tree that's gone gold 3 times now since I moved in. I teach a quilting class on Wednesday mornings at the senior center, the same one where I met Dolores, who is now one of the dearest friends I have ever had and who calls me every few days to report, with enormous and unconcealed satisfaction, on the latest small territory she has refused to surrender in my old kitchen. The rent from her room and the checks from Vanessa, on top of my pension, mean I live not merely comfortably but freely, which at my age is the only kind of comfort that means a single thing. Brandon comes every Sunday. Sometimes with the children, sometimes alone. Last week he came alone, and we made his father's pot roast together, the rosemary potatoes, the carrots on the bias, all of it, and he ate 3 helpings and told me it tasted exactly like being 9 years old and safe, and we both got teary right there over the stove and then laughed at ourselves for it. Vanessa and I are not friends, exactly. I don't honestly know if we ever will be, and I've made my peace with not knowing. But we are something, 2 women who were at war, and who chose, in the end, to lay the weapons down and see what could grow in the cleared ground. She sends me photographs of the children. She asks my advice about them sometimes, and really asks, and really listens to the answer, which is its own small miracle. At Thanksgiving this year, she set a place for me at the head of the table, the head, and when I protested and tried to take a side seat, she said, "Lo, just for me, no. You sit there. You always should have." And I sat there. And Dolores sat at my right hand, and we 2 old women presided over that loud full table like a pair of queens, which, it turns out, is exactly what we are. Did I get my family back? Not exactly the one I had. Some things, once they're broken, don't mend back to the same shape, and it does no good to pretend otherwise. But I'll tell you what I got instead, and it's better. I got a family that sees me. I traded a family that looked through me for a family that looks at me, and that is not a downgrade, my friends. That is the whole entire prize. And more than that, more than any of it, I got myself back. My name. My voice. My place at the table, at the head of it. My right to take up room in the world and not apologize for the space. Last month, Emma, she's 8 now, all elbows and opinions, drew me a picture. A little stick-figure woman with gray hair, standing in front of a house, holding a suitcase, with a great big crayon smile stretched across her face. Underneath, in her careful, uneven, beautiful letters, she had written, "My Grandma Maggie." She is the bravest person I know. She knew how to leave and she knew how to come back. I have it framed and hung on my living room wall, right where the morning sun hits it, right where I see it every single day over my coffee. Because that 8-year-old child understood, in one crayon sentence, a thing that took me 71 years and $250,000 to learn. Staying somewhere that hurts you is not love. It is only habit. And breaking a habit that is slowly killing you, even when it's terrifying, even when it feels selfish, even when the whole world lines up to tell you that family means swallowing your own life one quiet day at a time, is the single most loving thing you will ever do for yourself. So if you're sitting there tonight, heating up a dinner you weren't invited to eat, in a house where you've slowly stopped being a person and started being a service, hear me, because I was you, and I got out, and I am telling you the truth. You are not furniture. You are not free labor. You are not invisible, no matter how long they've acted like you are. And it is never, ever too late to pick up one suitcase and walk out the front door and back into your own life. If this story moved you, leave me a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching from. I read them, every one. Hit that like button if it reminded you that your dignity was never for sale. And subscribe to the channel, because here we tell the true-to-life stories of the women and men who finally, at long last, decided to respect themselves, the ones who learned, the hard way, the only lesson that has ever really mattered. Love that doesn't come with respect isn't love. It's just habit. And habits that hurt you are made to be broken.